Jacques was mentioning in the video that you can change the surface of the Earth in about 10 years. Is that the period you think, if looking forward we say that we have the amount of people needed in the movement, is that the amount of time you would need to get to the ideal city? And could you expand a bit on, well, how long will the transition take? And also on the social and economical mechanisms that we will expect to have during the transition.
Well, the 10-year thing is from my understanding in my own talks, because that was actually a dated video, was simply about what it would take when everyone's in agreement. Now that's a, you know, beyond that, I think it would take a lot longer to, I mean, the transition really is a cultural transition. It's the transition of getting people to understand it and realize that it's in their best interest and it's best for everyone and it will resolve tremendous numbers of problems. I really couldn't tell you the time frame of transition. It's impossible. It's a common question. I completely understand it. It's real. The more things unfold, the more we'll know. Right now, it's a big blob of instability and dormant kind of things that you can see a lot of things that are on the horizon that could sprout up and very quickly and very dramatically, but we don't know yet. Until something rather colossal happens, I can't give any frame of reference. I really don't know. All I know is that nothing's going to change until people begin to push the direction in the most critical mass that we can create. So that's just what I keep, you know, explaining to people.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Okay. I wish I could give you more information. I'm not a prophet.
Go on the right again, anyone on the right? Up at the back there.
Hi, you describe that we're defined by environment in the film. To me, that's just as dangerous as saying we're defined by our genetics.
It doesn't say we're defined by our environment. It says there's an interaction of environment and genetics, and the environment is triggering genetic responses. The environment. What is evolution? Evolution is the process of establishing traits. Well, actually, be more specific. Genes are changing along with the physiology of the organism. The organism's survival is contingent on what? The environment. The environment dictates everything at the end of the day. Our genes are products, in fact, of the environment through long periods of evolution. That's essentially the point that's being made. It's not a denial of genetics.
But you forget about the environment of our own intuition. It doesn't go into it on the video. It's, you know, we have our own intuition, and we might have a bad environment, but we can change things like everyone has here. You know, we've come here because of our intuition. That's could be a transition stage to develop the intuition, you know, our own being.
Okay, I don't know what intuition is. It's one of those terms that is undefined in my mind. I can't find a physical referent for the term intuition. I've heard a lot, but I think it's really a romantic notion. It's about, there's so many things happening in our brains. There are so many reactions, muscular, that are happening. Just like someone could throw a ball at me and I won't think about it and I'll grab something. I'll stick my arm out and catch it. Our brains are doing things constantly that we have no concept of and are perceiving things constantly. So a certain collage of environmental factors can trigger something and we have a reaction that's intelligent and we think to ourselves, ooh, I knew that that happened, but we don't know why. And we think, oh, it might be in our intuition, as though there's some type of sub-level. But it's really just the subconscious consuming comprehending things that our rational mind is unable to do and explain. That's the way I would define intuition personally.
I feel like it's more of a need to want to be in balance and want to be happy, you know. Because the world is not in balance. That's why we're all here, because we don't feel comfortable with it, you know. So there's an element in us that wants to change, that defines our character as well as the environment. That's what I'm saying. Oh, sure, no, I agree with that. And I don't know, but I just wouldn't say that's intuition, that's all. I would say that's the environment's effect on you, where you know something's wrong. You know, people say to me, oh, I just know something's wrong, and they don't know why. And that's why I go back to the example I just made, that there's so many interactions occurring around us that we can't possibly perceive. And responses that we do that we don't even think about. We play tricks on ourselves. The mind is extremely fallible in many ways when it comes to the influences that are coming in and out of it and the biases of the individual. So I don't want to go on a long-winded tangent on that, but I believe that when people say to me, you know, I just feel that something's wrong, it's not that it's a feeling per se. It's that it's a perception that they don't understand why. It's a feeling that's there because it's generated as a feeling, but it's an intellectual perception. Something's happened, but it's happened in a way that they don't mentally comprehend it. And that happens all day long with all of us. You know, a lot of books I've read on how mind plays tricks on you and the way we comprehend things. It's a fascinating subject. So, you know, but I agree. I mean, yeah, something's definitely wrong. And I think many people are beginning to realize that, whether they're conscious of it or not, you know.
Okay, just 2 quick comments on the cost of a city. I think Portugal is aiming to do a TV-like city with a central nervous system by 2015, and the estimated cost is $15 billion. And another comment on the population argument, check gapminder.org with statistical analysis from Hans Rosling. Some has good data on that, and how it gradually stabilizes to about 9 million by 2050. 9 billion, sorry, I'm confusing million with billions. Okay, my question now.
Yes, please.
It's regarding transition. I know the focus of the movement is getting the information out there and essentially making the value shift in the culture, but I think when the shit hits the fan, to be honest, people may need something more tangible. So my question is, do you think that we could, each chapter as a parallel action, get all the sustainability organizations together like Freeconomy, CollapseNet, or carpooling, and make a global or chapter level network of trying to get the fundamentals, so we have some stable network when the collapse, big collapse occurs. So
so bringing together of other organizations as more support, you mean?
Yeah, in parallel with getting the information out there.
No, absolutely. I mean, as long as the other organizations really understand the direction and are willing to support it. If there's dichotomy, people ask me all the time, well, why doesn't Greenpeace work with you, or why doesn't any other of the mainstream, so to speak, mainstream activist communities? Because they don't understand the direction. They're not identified with it. I've had numerous communications with lots of establishment institutions. And what can I do with an organization? I mean, a lot of activist organizations see the traffic. And they just want to put one of their banner ads up. They're not really into partnership. They just want to expose themselves. So as long as they're in line, but the Zeitgeist movement is this network in and of itself. And what I say to people in other organizations, I say, well, we'll continue to work with that organization, but why don't you come in and help support this as well as a secondary? And I think that's the best way to think about it. Rather than get confused, overlap with different intents, which I think can be very detrimental, I'd rather keep it homogeneous. And that's what I say to everyone. They say, well, why don't you partner with this, this, and this? And I say, why don't you maintain that and come to us as well? That's a better way to look at it, as opposed to confusing people. And we end up with 20 partner organizations, and they all have their own little angles of what they're doing. If any organization out there that's explicitly interested in a resource-based economy that isn't of an ego disposition, because we've had this happen where these sort of usurpers come in, and they come in a very, very, very non-professional, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very arrogant disposition where they want to usurp. They think they'll just do it better. They're not even trying to work with us. They want to just override it because they know better. I have an obvious disrespect for that, because what can you do with that when you have an internal group at odds? So I disregard that as well. If they're not willing to simply accept what we set up, that's already global now, it's already in motion, I have no real comment on that. I say if you really support it, you'll do your work with us and with whatever organization you're doing simultaneously. So that's the way I look at it.
Okay, I was just referring to transition mostly, and not like the ultimate goal, which is the resource-based economy. Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is the transition we're in right now. So that, we're in the transition, so everything that we're doing now is equally as important as it will be 10 years down the road.
Okay, there's a guy there, this guy in the middle here, sitting next to my daughter, who I'm trying hard to indoctrinate.
Hi, Peter. I'm here representing the Miami, Florida chapter, and we really don't have any problems getting the information out, finding people who agree. Our problems come after that. Like, what do we do after that? Most people, their exposure to the scientific method was high school chemistry. How can we get them to begin to think in that technician's mindset and then apply that to their daily lives and to how they view society? Like, what project can we take on as a chapter to begin educating our community?
That's a great question. I think there's some wonderful texts on the Venus Project's reading list that if you break them into chapters, obviously Jock's book, and then Tyranny of Words is a great thought exercise book. It's I consider it quite scientific in its abstraction. There's also, there's a lot of big interest now in science and sanity, I've found, the book Science and Sanity. A lot of books I can't really think of right now, but they force into the inferential state of mind, if you will, where it gets people to look at causal reality, just like I outlined, in part 3, where it's describing from the ground up why the reasoning of this society is what it is. So I guess you just simply have to kind of, if someone's new, try to get them into that mindset for the reasoning, understanding the reasoning, and that's essentially what the scientific method of thought is, as long as the data set, of course, is correct. So you have to be creative with it and also think about who you're dealing with. If someone's interest is already in a field of science, then push them towards something that's related to the field that they're in, so they have an identification with it. If someone is in an artistic context, then you would go in a very different way. You wouldn't give them, I can't think of an example, right? You wouldn't give them something so technically specific that it would be too much for them, So I recommend taking the individual into account and trying to get active information going. What everyone should be doing at all times is learning. And I think people forget that. Even I don't know everything. I haven't read everything on the Venus Project's reading list, even though I certainly want to. I haven't read everything that I've had in this gigantic list that's subsourced, but it's all there and I will eventually do it. The process of education is almost the most critical part, and getting people to understand just in as much as possible about what's relevant, as much as possible in a relevant context, specifically to the resource-based economy. So, excuse me, by the way, I'm very jet lagged, so that's a big question, and I would have to say that using the book sources as a starting point and pushing those books on those that have nothing to do, as you stated, or want something to do, and get your feedback on them and have groups that talk and discuss those ideas, and also invent and create. That's another thing I definitely recommend, especially for those that are technically minded, to get them to think about how they would redesign North America. What parameters would they use, and why? What would be the self-evident generation? Is it just a whim of theirs? Are they actually researching it? You see what I mean? There's all sorts of thought exercises that go into this, which is why, as I mentioned, From Earth to Venus is so important, and I'm really looking forward to getting that going. It's been a difficult programming complication as of now, to get people together and say, boom, oh, this is great. Think about how creative and fun that would be to get people that are fluent in, structural design, to start from the macrocosm and then hone in region by region about how you would design the most efficient society. So I recommend all of that. Beyond that, it's all a matter of awareness and spreading awareness for each one. So the scientific method, train of thought, isn't something that you can just give somebody, because inferential assessment has to be as objective as possible, and human beings intrinsically, especially in this culture, are not objective. So they have to overcome their victimization of culture, which we've talked about at length as well. So I hope that kind of helps.